When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
And we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite. Looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Hey there, Friday fans. We know how much you enjoy the movies. Enjoy grabbing your Friday merchandise and interacting with the Friday family, whether it be at conventions or during our particular watch-alongs. Well, when you're looking to get yourself masks, why not check out our friends over at Camp Blood Customs out of New York State and order your specific custom mask from any of the films. All orders are made specifically. Your needs and wants are. Make sure you find Camp Blood Customs on Facebook, Instagram, and all over social media and order yours today.
Hey there, this is Bill Behrens. I'm called the Agent of the Stars, and I need you desperately to listen to Crazy Train Radio. If you do not, you are just a big gunky.
Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it wouldn't be right for me to do so, so I'm going to pass the buck, Dr. Mike, our longtime close personal friend, as Gene Oakland would say. Dr. Mike, would you like to do the introductions here?
This is a man I have long respected without blowing smoke up anyone's ass. So this is not for children of all ages, perhaps, because he and I love to swear. But I have the utmost respect because this guy really goes to bat for his talent. He's known as the super agent of wrestling. There was another one that we lost, Scotty Epstein, but Bill Behrens has been all over the world. We were talking about, Jonathan and I, for the last couple of weeks, that 2007 fiasco where I was in touch with Bill at the Cow Palace. It should have been called WrestleCon, but that name is trademarked for an ethical wrestling fan fest. This thing was Wrestle Fan Fest. Bill, if you remember, husband and wife scumbags who fled with the cash boxes meant to pay the wrestlers and the MMA guys after their 3 days.
I think, if I remember right, my people were actually actually had their money, and they were the rare example.
I told you that, and you told me, and then I told everybody that, yeah, because Bill got the TNA talent from the Dudleys on, money up front, or the talent wouldn't arrive because everybody else got effed on their money. And I was the guy because I was the hired photographer with a rubber check for the event. But I had to go out that third day, Sunday, to Goldberg's limo, to Steve Austin's limo, and Chyna's limo. and a local San Francisco Mark eye doctor was the one at least footing the bill for that stuff, to tell them what a effing mess this was. Not even the Ring of Honor talent or Gabe got paid for putting on a tremendous show. So every one of these wrestlers, they all agreed to go through with it, even when they found out they weren't going to get paid. And the worst scenario, so the only guys that got paid was because Bill is so effing wise and smart to demand money up front. So this is a guy that will go to battle for his talent. He's the one that introduced on so many levels the great, phenomenal AJ Styles to wrestling. And well, we're gonna be talking about the NWA big weekend that Bill is going to at Kiel. Kiel and the wrestling at the Chase that I shot at many times in the 70s next weekend for Billy Corgan's NWA. Huge weekend there. But Bill, welcome to the show. And man, it's good to talk to you after, we only talked on the phone. And I think the first time
I was actually saying that to our co-host earlier, that we've known each other for decades, but I don't know that we've ever had met. This is the closest to actually meeting I think we've had, because I don't count phone and, and email and stuff, but we've communicated forever. So, it's nice to finally get together and be able to share some stories. And I understand.
And I want to say this too, though, as much as I said, a pain in the ass he could be as a friend, promoter, whatever, Mr. Carney himself, we lost Howard Brody today. I'm going to dedicate the show today to Howard, who I just found out about. He had quad bypass surgery last week and didn't pull through it. But, you have dealt with so many characters, only in wrestling type characters. And it isn't blowing smoke to say that you take great pride and love of the biz and the people therein to, as you did in 2007 and many times since. I mean, you really are respected globally by talent, et cetera, and promoters for all the good things you do. I mean, not one person has ever said one bad thing about Bill Behrens, and you should get your flowers while you're alive and know that, because that ain't true of 99% of the people in the biz.
Well, as one of my favorite clients, Mike Posey, likes to say, I try. So that's sort of my gimmick. And I'm pleased we're dedicating this to Boom Boom, Howard Brody. I always called him Boom Boom, which he hated. And but Howard I've been mad at Howard more than I've been happy with Howard, is just the truth. And I won't go into the detail on the things that made me angry, but I will say that without Howard, the NWA, Howard and Dennis Carluzzo, without Howard and Dennis Carluzzo and Bob Trowbridge, the NWA wouldn't be available for Billy Corgan to be doing what he's today. And even though it was a cluster of how it got there, I was able to be involved from 1999 until it was lost by litigation. And fortunately was redeemed after that. And Howard got me in. I was Howard's vice president for 3 years before, right after his Florida show where AJ wrestled Chris Daniels for the first time and broke out as a real star, or even after WCW, which Howard was responsible for. And we had the terrible cage match that I had with Howard where they screwed up and I never would do a feud with him. But Howard resigned from the NWA then. So he had, from 99, when I got involved, he was in 98 until 2001. He was the guy and he was doing a wonderful job. And I wish he had hung in there and not become a contrary force to what we were doing, because it ended up not going well at the end game for any of us.
Let me tell you something quickly, because I emailed you this. I don't think you got to see it right before we started Crazy Train Radio here with Jonathan Steele, but Coraluzzo was a good friend of mine. Now, he was a Carney guy and a character.
He was the most honest man I've ever known. It literally, he literally would tell you that he was going to rip off a group of nuns, and he would tell the truth. He was a totally honest, dishonest man. he never ripped anybody off without doing it right to their face. It was
Well,
brilliant.
something to be said for that. Hey, I love Dennis. I knew he had these other issues, God rest his soul, but he would bring me out and put me up at his house for these NWA meetings that started, I'm guessing, 92, because Steve Ricard was there, Trowbridge and Brody, and I've got the photos. So it was like whenever that started, maybe 92, 93. But
Did you go to the I think it was 98 one, the 50th anniversary, the one that Luthez was at, and Harley and
Oh, wait, no, the one in Tampa?
No, the one that was in New Jersey that Dennis promoted.
No, I don't think I was at that one because I forget when he died. It was like 99 or something like that. But no, we had a Cauliflower Alley. I helped, and I know you're from that area. You're in Atlanta, or maybe a suburb outside of Atlanta. I forget where. Because I've got family in Calhoun, Georgia. And in the early 70s, I used to go and beg my in-laws and relatives to take me to the Atlanta City Auditorium, where I think it was a Christmas show 73. It was one of the weirdest Styles Clash matches I ever shot. Blassie just visiting family there. He wasn't a regular whatsoever in Atlanta for promoter Paul Jones. Not the worker, but the promoter Paul Jones. And he had what turned into a semi-shoot with Bill Watts because Fred wouldn't sell for Bill. And it was almost as goofy as the ultimate Styles Clash I ever shot, again involving Blassie as a heel against Billy Robinson at the HAC Arena in Honolulu about the same year, 73 earlier.
I've been to Atlanta City Auditorium. I saw Dory and Jack do a 60-minute Broadway and a tag with the Sheik and Abby against Andre and Wrestling 2. That was the main card.
Wow.
And we ended up doing an article for our college paper. This would have been 75, 6, somewhere around there. But it was and the great thing was at one point, I mean, the Abby Sheik team basically just didn't get along, of course, go figure. And Andre and 2 just, after doing a few babyface spots early, just sat in the corner with 2 on Andre's shoulder, just watching as Sheik and Abby started brawling. And then all of a sudden cops ran up the aisleway and started wielding their billy clubs all over the place. And I'm sitting with all my friends from college. I was the wrestling guy. We had interviewed Rocky Johnson that day. And and the cops just beat the crap out of somebody. We don't know who. We figured, oh, crap, Sheik, Abby. And then all of a sudden, they're just dragging fans out. That was the Atlanta Auditorium. It was like the cops went in, beat the crap out of the fans, dragged them out so that Abby and Sheik could brawl. And,
Jonathan, excuse me for 1 sec, because the first guy, I ran the Sheik's fan club in 66, his international fan club. Then with John Arisi, we took over the Fred Blassie fan club from my Mike LaBelle LA territory. He was my boss. And when he became the PR guy for Mike LaBelle, he had to give up the fan club. And then in late 72, I started the Tolis Brothers fan club, living in LA, their ringside photographer. I also did it for Shire as his only ringside photographer for his program, for Northern California. But Les Thatcher of the Atlanta office, starting about late 72, early 73, he and Bob Armstrong used to send me clippings from the newspaper programs, and Les started writing for my newsletter about as shoot as you could do then. It was a straight Larry Matisic type commentary thing for me to use, and was a guy I've kept in touch with since, and I wish I had with you. Did you take any pictures of that? Any of those?
No, it was one of those. I've had many in my career of cross wrestling and other things. Like I was a Rocket concert reviewer. This is just an example of how stupid I can be. And one of the things I was offered that the record company wanted me to do is I was supposed to ride in the limo with the Sex Pistols when they did their U.S. debut, which happened to be in Atlanta. And I was aware of, they weren't necessarily normal, and regardless of whatever drug use I was familiar with, it was probably way beyond what I would be comfortable. So I said no. So I look back on those kind of things and go, that was just sort of dumb. But no, I went to this thing and didn't even think to bring a camera. we were going there. We did a tape interview because we were doing it for Black Studies at Emory University, where Mike Sager, a very famous writer who his article about John Holmes became Boogie Nights. So,
wow.
Yeah, good guy. So anyway, he was in college. Bunch of us, we went there, and the premise of this thing I forget what it was, but it was wrestling black folk and something. I have no idea, but it involved black folk, and it was part of the class, and the teacher liked it. And my gig was to get there and get an interview with an African-American wrestler. So I got contacted Paul Jones's office, and I said, okay, you've got two guys on the card, and you've got Rocky Johnson and you've got Abby. And they said, well, clearly you can't talk to Abby because, well, he's a wild man from the Sudan. So I went, okay, cool. Then he said, well, you can talk to Rocky. So I said, cool. So we went up and we got a few minutes with Rocky. And one of my favorite moments was I did the young guy interview spot with Rocky going, so I don't really want to ask you this because I already know the answer and I think it's insulting, but is wrestling real or fake? And Rocky said, what I can tell you honestly is that everything you see actually happens.
That's a good answer.
Yes. So that was one of my earliest experiences. Literally that mid-70s was the first experience I had until I began putting wrestling TV on in the 90s and then got more involved when Jerry Jarrett called me in 1993.
I'm going to throw to Jonathan, but I want to say this because with my advanced dementia, I'm going to probably forget it, but guess who Abby asked 2 years ago, and he hasn't lifted a finger to co-write his autobiography with him, me. And this was on a COVID Con podcast where I had him and Terry Funk and some others. We all did interview spots for this marathon raising money for people in the biz affected by COVID, not able to do Fan Fest or wrestle or, do anything, appearances, and we're losing significant income. But now he's happy to, be called Larry Shreve. He'll talk to anybody.
He actually did one of his first autograph signings for me. I always got along with Butcher. I always got along with Abby. But and it was because he kept saying no, and then I had him at a show, and I said, "What the fuck? Just do it." And I forget where it was, but he did the first time. He was in Wildside for a minute, and we did ads for him on our TV show with him and Honest John and his son.
Did he get rid of Honest John? Where is that guy? That guy's
Billy Robinson, Honest's real name, wonderful man. He passed away, unfortunately. And he was essential to Butcher in, the latter years of his career because Billy would drive Butcher everywhere because Butcher's narcoleptic and falls asleep at the drop of a hat. So he can't drive anywhere because he'll fall asleep on the road.
And his real name was, of all people, Billy Robinson?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and he a big, gigantic guy, talented kid.
I met him a zillion times at every WrestleCon. He was always there, and I go, "Who is this Mark?" It's like a hanger-on.
Yeah, he seemed that way, but he was essential to Butcher. I mean, literally, without Billy, Butcher would not have gotten around as he got larger and less mobile.
But he was in the wheelchair like 2011 when I'd see him, and so now that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and Billy was with him from, I first used them in 97. So that was the first time I was using Billy and Butcher. Oh, so that's how long they were together. Because
don't kill me, Jonathan. Listen,
Billy passed away maybe a year ago.
Abby debuts for us in LA in 1970, but he came in to do our TV at KCOP, Channel 13, the shittiest low power UHF. And it was right off Hollywood Boulevard in Fairfax near Farmer Park.
They finally got full power though, bless their hearts. They finally were upgraded.
But listen to this. So Abby debuted. He came over, he had a program with Baba, even met him on one of our Battle Royal shows, and he had a match with Rocky Johnson at the Olympic Auditorium. But Abby came in with a midget manager, and for the life of him, he can't recall who that was. If it was somebody that, like Jeff Walton set him up with from a talent agency, but he had a heel manager doing all of his talking. And this was when he was 1970. I think I coined the phrase "skinny Abby" because I brought it up with Dory Jr. this morning.
That Abby could actually, it was like New Jack when he was in good shape. Could the skinny Abby, just like New Jack, could actually wrestle. I mean, literally could hip toss all the different moves, not just elbow drop for Abby or slice and dice for Jack. Jack did that at XPW one time. He told me he was in the opening match, and I said, well, you can do all your shit, and when it's all over with, how do people follow you? Or do something else. So he went out and he brought he brought his shopping cart of stuff up to the ring. And then he ran into the ring and did hip toss, arm drag. And everybody in the back is going, what the hell is going on? New Jack is wrestling. Because nobody remembered that he could.
Oh, I did from WCW, but I better throw to Jonathan because you and I could talk for 3 hours straight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And none of this has any direction at all. It's just all over the place.
That's the beauty of it. That's the fun.
Exactly. And I was telling Mike in an email before this, I'm letting you take the lead because there's times like this I enjoy sitting back and listening to the stories. But two things I want to bring up. Well, first one, because you guys were talking about Abby, and I always tell this story. I think it's hilarious just because we all know of the character that Abby was on screen and everything else like that. And we were backstage of a show of an independent called 3PW back in the day in Philadelphia.
Jasmine St. Clair's.
Jasmine and Meany's thing. Yeah, I worked with them a lot.
Yep.
And so they had Abby in, for a show. I think it was at the Electric Factory, which is a famous venue here in the Philadelphia area and such. And so, show's over, things are getting packed away and everything. And a couple of us are just sitting in the back talking. Abby was kind of holding court. And sure enough, somebody had their kid with them, worker or whatever. I can't remember who, but they approached him and said, Mr. Butcher, is there any chance you could sign an autograph for my kid? Waves him over. Yeah, come on over. But he's like, the funny part about him was like, how much you want for the kid? I'll give you $50 for the kid. Right? Abby's odd sense of humor. All right, I'll give you $75 for the kid. He signs the autograph and everything. It was quite entertaining because the kid's sitting there looking, Dad, you're not going to really sell me, are you?
Hey, you never know. I'll do two short Abby stories just because we're on an Abby credit. And one is a Howard Boom Boom Brody story. So, in tribute to Howard. So we were in Charlotte for what year? 2000? NWA anniversary show. And Abby was going to work. Oh, golly, I forget the guy's name. Don somebody, a big black kid out of Detroit. And he had never, that kid had never bladed. So that was an issue. And Howard was having this terrible time with Abby, getting him to understand what he needed done and getting Abby to agree. And I walked up and Howard is just like sweating. He's, if you were ever around Howard when he was exasperated, it's just very entertaining. It's like Foghorn Leghorn, but Jewish.
Now what's that? I say, now what's that boy up to? Better check on it, yeah.
And he's just going crazy. And I go, so what's the problem? And he goes, well, blah, 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 this, and Abby needs to do that and in this match. And and I looked at Butcher and I went, so Abby, what about please? And he went, okay, boss. And he walked away. And Howard looked at me and said, I've just spent 15 minutes trying to explain to him what we needed, and you just said, please? I said, yeah, that's all he needed. So that's the first Abby story. Second one is he worked a guy in my building named Ruckus. And at one point in the match, this fan hit the ring. and we had to drag her down, a lady. We had to drag her down before she got into the ring. And in the back, Abby's smoking his cigar, sitting like he is, trying to tell me I had offered him more money than I had. and in walks Ruckus, and he brings the lady that had jumped the rail, who proves to be his mom. And the mom says, and Abby says, and Ruckus says, Mr. Abdullah, I really want to introduce you. This is my mom, and she's sorry. And she just goes, she has attitude still, and she's going, I just want you to know, Mr. Butcher, if I made it to the ring, I would have hit you with this, hat or whatever she had. And he said, yes, ma'am. And if you had, I would have cut you with the fork.
Wait, was Ruckus the guy that was the super talented kid in Ring of Honor? And
No. That's the CKUS Ruckus. This kid was a kid out of Georgia that was very good, but he only got out as far as he did. But fortunately, they had different spellings.
Okay.
Unlike the homicide I had in Wildside that became Murder One, that had to change his name because of homicide. D pretty much gets homicide.
Right.
So anyway, with Dennis Carluzzo and the stories you guys were joking about with him, was it not much of a surprise back in the day with the whole NWA tournament thing and with Paulie pulling a fast one because Paulie's Paulie and whatnot? So was it kind of like coming back to Dennis?
Yes. From a Jersey thing, yes. I wasn't involved then. But the whole thing was, Dennis was a promoter in the area. In theory, they were cooperating, but the greater theory, because remember, there was also the Joel Goodhart thing was sort of associated with Eastern Championship Wrestling.
Oh no, it morphs
more than Dennis was.
Joel, I'm doing the photos for Joel's book with Scott Teal. Joel canned the very last show in '92 that Japan had sent me my trans and my hotel. It was going to be Buddy Rogers against Landell, Nature Boy versus Nature Boy, Doc and Gordy against Crawford and Furnace, a terrific card. Yeah. Abby Peak rematch in the cage, because I shot all of Joel's TWA. And so Joel claimed financial problems, shuts down TWA, but his number 2 guy, Todd Gordon, I guess gave him X amount of money to purchase it and morphed it into Eastern Championship Wrestling. So that TWA actually good.
Yeah. They literally morphed, and then all of a sudden the talent thing, because a lot of the excess that Joel liked to book, like he did an amazing 3-match thing with Eddie Gilbert and Cactus. That was also way too much, and that was sort of Joel's stuff. When I was getting it back in the time, it was, I like that he's trying to do all this stuff, but he's hurting himself by trying to do too much on every show. I always thought he was over.
That thing was, I was there. There was 3 different step matches between Cactus and Eddie.
Yeah, by the time they got to the last match, nobody cared because they had done everything. I mean, it was at this point, it was like drop the cow at the Cow Palace. It's all you got. There's nothing left. And that was the problem I think Joel had, was he was just so much in love with the hotshot aspect of it. And then Todd got started with the Eastern, and it was a little more traditional at first until Paul got there. And then they decided to go crazy. And Paul's success with ECW was much more his ability to protect marginal talent and find a way to make them stars. Because at the very beginning, the guys that got over at the beginning weren't their best workers.
It's Dreamer and
Public Enemy,
Man and Tommy Fierro and Tommy
and Public Enemy and fucking Public Enemy. Public Enemy was their first breakout. 2 guys, two guys in their 40s basically. One guy that can barely remember he's going to the ring sometimes, and the other guy that had been under the mask as, what was he, Cheetah Kid?
Yeah, exactly, Ted Petty.
Yeah, so. He just recreated them as hip-hop guys.
You guys will not believe this one, because I was close to Dennis, and he would let me stay at his place even when I'd come out to shoot Joel Goodhart's. But he then did a Tom Robinson benefit with his arch enemies. He professed hatred for Joel and Todd. So he puts on people thought Tom Robinson, who was a longtime fan wrestler, was dying. So he does a joint show with Todd Gordon, and I posed Todd with Cora Luzo. They legit hated each other. I had them pretend to strangle each other with stately Wayne Manor, Ernie Santilli trying to break it up in the middle. Only Philly, Jersey people would get this. But after, I'm going to throw back to Jonathan. After the Shane Douglas throwing down the belt deal, after a full 2-day Coraluzzo big convention shows, NWA meeting I had to shoot, Dennis and his pal also passed away, Fat Gino Moore, that's what he called himself. They went and slashed Dreamers and Heyman's tires at ECW Arena for, like the show immediately after or the second one after the Shane throwing down the belt thing. Yeah. They went and slashed the tires. It was like snowy at the parking lot of ECW Arena.
Yeah, Gino was great. All those guys were great because they weren't people I would ever do business with, but it was just a joy to know they existed. They were literally wrestling mafia. It's like in the way they would do everything. And then they had, their Dennis even had their own fake attorney in Mr. Fred Rubenstein. It was like, who was pretending to be their lawyer, and it was just like all ridiculous nonsense. It was fantastic.
I won't say anything about the name.
Wait, I have to tell you one quick Dennis story. I'm sorry. This is very quick. It's a very quick Dennis story. It happens to be true, and with all apologies to the Iron Sheik, but everybody knows this anyway. So anyway, I booked Sheiky Baby. But the first time I booked him, Dennis wanted to facilitate it. So this is really early on. I'm VP with the NWA with Boom Boom, and Dennis is still involved, but nobody's going to give him any authority nor let him get anywhere near the money because, well, it's Dennis. And so he says, we'll do a 3-way call with Sheiky and I'll help you work it out. And I go, blah, 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 Sheiky, blah, 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 this outdoor show, you'll work Bob Armstrong, blah, 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 blah. And this is what I'll pay you. And he goes, oh, okay. And he tries to get more. And I say no. And it is what it is. And then out of nowhere, he goes, oh, Dennis, will I get the medicine? And Dennis goes, oh, yeah, I'll get with Bill and I'll make sure you get the medicine. No problem, Sheiky baby. And he hangs up and I call Dennis and go, okay, Dennis, the rate is fine. I'm good because that's the budget. And what the fuck is the medicine? And he goes, oh, well, you need to go get Sheiky some cocaine. And I went, no, I am not getting Sheiky cocaine. So you need to call Sheiky back and tell him there's no freaking medicine. And if he's going to bring any, I better not see it anywhere near me or I won't pay him his money. So that was my introduction to both Sheiky and one of my great Dennis experiences. For Dennis was, yeah, no problem. Yeah, you book Sheiky, you get him cocaine. That's what you do.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Jesus.
But, yeah, that's Sheiky baby.
I got another one where Evan Ginsberg, another historian I've known for 40 plus years.
Yeah. Nice guy.
We are babysitting. We are asked these quarterly has-been movie and TV. And these are, I'm not saying that as a derogatory term because there was a lot of big people, Ron Howard there, but it was legends of movie and TV. And they did the Fields family would do these, and they still do since the pandemic, every 3 months at the Burbank Airport Hilton, gigantic room, fan fest where the talent aren't, they don't pay anything to get their vendor tables, but then I guess in exchange for having these famous stars that can be advertised, so they'll sell a shitload of tickets. So Evan and I are babysitting Kaz, Iron Sheik, Greg Valentine, Albano, Nikolai Volkov, and I think like Honky Tonk Man.
Wow, the only one that's going to be sober would be Nikolai.
Listen to this. So Sheik had not yet.
Just what I was thinking.
Cosro had not yet been part of the freak show, first on Opie and Anthony and later Howard Stern. And I tell you, Shuley from Howard Stern paid me to babysit Iron Sheik for the West Coast swing of the Ronnie Munn block party, basically a tour of the Howard Stern Wagpackers and then some of the staffers who do stand-up comedy. So I'm in the limo making sure Kaz gets to all of the venues like San Francisco, Sacramento, Modesto, Stockton, LA, etc. But back to the fan fest, and right across from us is Tracy Lords, the porn star, and all these famous people, Marion Ross of Happy Days, and et cetera, and Ronnie Howard and stuff. So
You had me at Tracy Lords and Marion Ross in the same area.
So Kaz stands up and he starts, for no reason at all, as loud as possible. And again, remember, this is before he started doing this as a regular, when they saw, oh, this guy's nuts, we'll bring him in. And I love Kaz because I met him when he got out of the, when Leroy McGurk and Vern Gagne were training him for pro as this decorated amateur, normal guy from the Mexico City 72 Olympics, so 73. So Kaz gets up, stands up, and he goes, F, and he uses the full F word, Bob Backlund. He goes over and over, F, Bob Backlund. I'll get behind him and Brian Blair and F them in the butt and make them humble. And he just starts saying this, and then he calmly just sits back down. And Tracy Lords, Marion Ross, Ronnie Howard, his brother from the Gentle Ben CBS TV show from
Clint, he used to live in my part. He lived in my part.
All of these folks,
I grew up with
Taylor.
I grew up with Clint Howard, and Rip Taylor came to USWA at one point. Yeah.
Well, and the Billy Mummy from Lost in Space, and the kid from Family Affair that played Jody, whatever his name was, something Whitaker.
Yeah,
they were babysitting Rip Taylor. They all look at, who on earth is this insane person? And it was just our Cosro, Iron Sheik. So I'll shut up because Jonathan hasn't had a chance to talk.
Pleasure for me, and I fuck you in the ass.
Pleasure for me. Madison Square Garden, greatest city in the world. That's Cos.
Yeah, it's I give you 8x10 with title belt for a beer. We
haven't mentioned him telling Terry Funk in Puerto Rico before Frank was sadly murdered. I give her the short clothesline, Terry. Why am I going to jail, or something like that? That story that Bill might have heard of more accurately than I did.
No.
A prostitute that Cos, I guess she wouldn't put out. She didn't like the money, and he actually clotheslined her.
Yes,
I heard a different version of that. It might have been Marty Jannetty that told the story.
And again, makes perfect sense.
Yes. Yeah. Should I tell that story? Or should I leave that out in the air?
Well, go ahead. We're telling everything else.
Yeah. So version I heard, and it was WWF days in the later 80s. And this is before the whole Jersey Turnpike hacksaw with Sheiky Baby. And they're in like Iowa or somewhere out that way. And you know how rats can be, and they had their usuals. Well, Marty had his eye on, at least the version he tells, is he had his eye on this new trophy, let's say. Hey, Kaz, can you keep an eye on this one the whole bit? So next thing you know, Marty goes to handle his business with this new trophy, let's just say. And so Sheiky Baby goes off with this other one at their time in a bar, and he gives her some pills, and allegedly, I should say. There might have been some powder involved, and this, that, and the other. And a couple drinks up in a room, and something, like Mike said, might it not have been agreeable for whatever the reason may be.
No happy ending.
Oh, yeah. So Marty finishes his business, comes out of his room, was going to come meet them back down at the bar and all. And it was one of those hotels that you would see out in a parking lot, out of the hallway. And so he sees an ambulance and a cop car, a couple cop cars and all that kind of stuff. I wonder what happened. Because he was doing something else. So Sheiky comes down to his room a couple minutes later, knocks on the door, looking like the repo man. Marty, I need to come in your room quick. All right, what's going on? Comes in the room. Or excuse me, before Sheiky Baby came down to Marty's room, the cops had maybe knocked on Marty's door and says, hey, do you guys know a Cosmo Missouri? And played dumb, I don't know. So Cos comes down to the room and goes, Marty, I don't, well, the cops are looking for you. What happened? Well, same thing I told you. I gave her little medicine, another drink or two, yada yada yada. She wasn't happy with whatever, and so I gave her a short clothesline. Marty's like, "What in the hell's a short clothesline?" Well, the best way to describe it would be that thing like Jake Roberts would do, where he almost be pulling you in and just hitting you with the deal. And what Marty had seen with the ambulance and stuff was the original girl being put onto the ambulance and being taken to the hospital.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
So
a good
there
night.
might have
Not a
been
good night for the
multiple,
girl, and at least they survived.
Yeah,
there
and
were
it's
multiple,
and it's the usual, for the time period. Let's just say.
Yeah. I never had to deal with him or Marty at any level. I was around them. The only one I ever dealt with that had interesting experiences that could compare would be New Jack.
Yeah, and that would be a light night for New Jack. But on a more serious note, I'm curious to know. Obviously, you are agent of the stars. You talked a little bit about your NWA time and just a little bit. We've been everywhere here so far.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I enjoy and appreciate because there's nothing like wrestling and the stories that you get for obvious reasons, like the one I just told. And when we're being serious and you were helping a talent get a booking or whatever the case is, I'm curious to know because it's not like any other business where there's a union or there's this or certain structures that you would see in other fields. I'm curious to know how you would go about handling somebody's business as far as saying, and I'll use AJ because I know you worked with AJ for a long time. And I'm not saying this is true because I don't know his business. I'm not the IRS. I could give two shits. But how would you go about saying, hey, if somebody calls Bill Behrens and says, hey, I'd like to bring in AJ. Well, AJ would like X amount of money. He would like this, like that. Going through the business structure you would to book said talent. How does that look like for you?
It's there's several types of representation I do. One is just a booking agent where I help people. But I'm not their agent per se. Like I'll help Eric Bischoff. I'm certainly not his agent. I book Jim Ross. I'm certainly not his agent. I book Kevin Nash. I'm certainly his agent. Sean Waltman, not his agent. They're more friends. So if I get them their rate and I babysit it and they get what they want, whatever that rate is, I get 10%, and that's that kind of deal. And then there's the greater thing, which would be, is the guys where I'm involved in helping them craft their career. And AJ be an example of that. Christopher Daniels would be an example of that. Mike Posey would be an example of that. In recent signee, 2 years now in at AEW, Griff Garrison is an example of that. Wow. Slim J, who just got signed there, is an example of that. And Hernandez, Abyss, Ron Killings. The list is Delirious, who ended up becoming a wonderful booker. Those are the people where I've been more involved in helping them develop their talent and their position to make a living in the business, which is different. What I determined early on in my experiences, I was involved as TV boy in USWA. I was involved in putting the USWA show all over the place. And I was working for WWF at the time because they were subcontracting the show and selling commercials and paying me, even though I didn't know the show, but that's how Jerry got me paid, Jerry Jarrett. And then all of a sudden, Jerry Jarrett sold out for $260,000 to Larry Burton, and Lawler has it. And all of a sudden, I'm booking the promotion. And I have no idea what I'm doing. And then, thank God, Dutch comes in and I get to learn from somebody that learned from Eddie Graham. Thank God. So now I'm doing that. Then all of a sudden it goes out of business and I'm a promoter with Burt Prentice and I'm still doing the TV stuff because my calling card was exposure. And then after we did stuff and I joined the NWA, and after we did stuff in Nashville, where we launched people like Shannon Moore and Shane Helms and folk like that. I started promoting in Georgia. We did the Wild Side thing. And I learned early on from a brief period of time trying to be a promoter that I am a terrible promoter. I do not have the patience. To be a promoter, you have to literally be selfless. You have to really need to do it. And anybody can book a show. Anybody can rent a building. But to get butts into seats is a challenge, and only good people do that, and everybody else is just screwing around with money. And I was never a good promoter. But when I finally got a building that I was renting all the time, hooked up where I could produce my TV, and all I had to do was turn the lights on, then the business that I wanted to be in was created, which is to develop talent. So that's how Wildside transitioned the bad promoter I was into the talent development person I became. And that led to me doing development for WCW. It led to me putting Wildside out of business to have 3 dismal months trying to do development for WWE with Jody Hamilton and Billy DeMott. But it gave me my direction. My direction was to try to drive young people and to make money, but I was never going to be the person that paid them the money.
Now, the other side of that, too, is with that original thought in question is how would, say, a talent decide what their face value is, whether it's they're wrestling or doing an autograph appearance or whatever the case may be, because rightfully so, Kevin Nash may get more money than a Griff Garrison. And I'm not disparaging either.
100% right. No,
but
no,
how do, because obviously you don't want to say, I want 10,000.
And there's thousands of difference potentially. Yes.
But, you know, you want to get what you're worth, but also you don't want to outprice yourself to where you don't get the gigs that you might be looking for, if that makes sense.
The people that make the decision on that are promoters. And fortunately, promoters, and I mean this with tremendous love because I need promoters, but it's great when promoters are fans and promoters are marks, because when they believe somebody is worth a lot of money, they are. And until a promoter believes people are worth money, they're not. Every time a promoter bitches about a rate, I always point out promoters have total control over the value of the wrestler, because all they have to do is say no. And then that person doesn't get booked if that person needs a certain amount of money. But it's the promoters that perpetuate whether somebody is a perceived star at any one time. And that's why frequently, and you'll see a cycle on the indies where there's a flavor of the month, and only a few of the people have real plans on how they're going to grow their rate. Anybody I work with has a plan. AJ had a plan when we left TNA after they were idiots and we went out and did Ring of Honor, New Japan, and the Indies. There was a plan to rebuild him as a star. There was a plan with Griff Garrison to build him. There's a plan with a lot of these other people, but not a lot of other people have plans. Matt Cardona, wonderful plan. He came out and went, boom, I'm going to make myself a star. Otherwise, you're hopeful that what you've done before, particularly if you're already an established star, will get you booked. And that's one of the great shocks for many of the people that get released from companies, even after a lot of TV time, is they may not be the star they thought they were unless they're the flavor of the month for the promoters. So just being in WWE doesn't necessarily get you booked. Just being in NXT even more doesn't get you booked. It was just something you did. AJ, when he went out on the indies and did Ring of Honor and New Japan and the rest of the stuff he did that made him the star that got him to WWE, he was never promoted as being formally from TNA. Ever. And yet he was TNA's most decorated champion. Ever. That's the difference. And what is somebody worth? It literally depends on the promoter. If I say this guy is 750 plus air plus main cabin, economy air, and private room hotel, then the guy goes, well, do I get the autograph session with that? I go, no. The rates I quote are either to wrestle, which is a job, or to sign, which is a job. If they wrestle, they assume they get to sell their stuff and keep the money. So you have to decide what you want. Oh, well, we're used to getting both. Well, okay. Probably not this time, or let's see if we can compromise. And that, again, promoters are in total control, though. Promoters hate working with an agent because agents ask them intelligent questions. And promoters prefer to not be asked intelligent questions. They prefer that you just do what they want and that you're desperate as a talent and that you want to get booked.
Yeah, because the reason I was thinking about that was there was a certain talent having issues with a certain company now. It's supposedly had issues prior. And the rumor was going around about their potential convention price that they would want. And it was like, and I'm not in that business per se of booking conventions or matches or anything like that. But I'm sitting there thinking, well, if this person X wanted, let's say, $25,000 to do an appearance, I'm like, I didn't see the value of it. It's like where it's like, if I'm going to spend that money.
By the way, I'm not aware of anybody getting that kind of money on any kind of regular basis to do anything. A high end rate in appearance money is about $10,000 in general, but that's for 3-4 hours of doing stuff. What's good? A lot of guys think they're stars and try to start at $2,500 to $3,000 to find out they're $1,000 guy. So
yeah, but it was like, if I'm going to spend the 25 for a big show, say Comic-Con and all that kind of thing, it's like, I'd rather go spend that money on these two talents that would bring me the money back and then some. You look at it as a business.
But again, it depends on, that gets back to me saying I'm a terrible promoter. It depends on what you think you can sell. If somebody says they're worth $2,500 and you believe you can make that money back, bless your heart, pay the money. I look at it differently. For every $2,500 at a wrestling show, I always assume I'm selling a ticket for $10 because that's the generation I'm from. Mm-hmm. It's now 20, 25, whatever, but still the math is the math. But if I'm doing it, I'm going to go to book that 2,500 got a guy. Let's add 500 for air and hotel just for fun. If my ticket is, let's call it $15 just to have fun, I need to draw 150 people specifically because this guy's in my building. And will I do that? And if you're a promoter and believes you can draw that money, great. Same thing. If you're doing an autograph signing and you're charging $45 for a combo and the guy wants $5,000, you need 100 and some odd people to buy that combo or you're wasting your money. But that's not my job. My job is to get the most money I possibly can for my client, and they deserve every penny. And it's up the job of the promoter to make as much money as they can off of what they invest. And if they don't, it's their fault. It's not the talent. No talent draws money. Promotion draws money. Talent is facilitated by being promoted. But if you can promote Jesus, and if nobody knows he's there, nobody's going to bow and genuflect.
Exactly. And it was, when you say that, I was thinking of the way Al Snow talks about it. It's like, if I put his name.
Hang on. Al Snow on my shirt right now. Okay.
All right. So it's the way he tells the story is if you could put your name on a poster, whether it's a signing or a match or whatever the case is, at a Wawa, a Royal Farm, a 7-Eleven, whatever the case is to promote the show, is the people who see that sign in the promotion going to spend a $10, $15, $20 to come see that person?
Yes.
So,
and do you get the posters out far enough that enough people can see that it matters? It's, again, it's not the talent, it's the voice promoting the talent that gets the talent over. And no matter, sometimes, no matter how hard you try, it doesn't work. I booked New Jack in a I had New Jack book against Tommy Rich. Tommy no showed, bless his heart. But that just saved me money. And we were doing a nightclub in the African American neighborhood in downtown Atlanta. We did a promotion at Clark College where New Jack was an alumni, where he was given an award at halftime of their homecoming game. With New Jack being announced, we offered that the students could come for 50% off with an ID, and I drew 100 people. It's, what do you do? And I bought ads on freaking WWE programming on cable, and I didn't draw a dime in the middle of the neighborhood that I should have drawn, with a talent that in theory should draw, who was just honored at a freaking college right down the road. What else do I need to do? But it didn't draw. I'm a sucky promoter. My fault. I lost a couple of $1,000 on the show. Jack got paid. Not his fault.
No. Dr. Mike?
Hopefully you guys can still hear me, but that tells you the amount of time and money that sometimes agents and promoters, etc., lose in the face of making sure the talent gets paid and entertaining the fans and all of that. So kudos to Bill and others like him of his ethics level. Not a lot. Bill, off air, I've got a ton of Jerome stories for you, because he and I hit it off after all the times backstage at ECW, etc. This was after I covered him at Smoky Mountain with Mustafa, and D'Lo joining the fray at a little bit later point on. Jerome would often call me. He was like, and probably the same to you. And sometimes I just wouldn't pick up. And now that he passed, I'm sorry. Asking me to try to help him find movie and TV work in Hollywood after the Wrestling Society X thing fizzled on MTV and VH1. The whole entire first season didn't even air after a fire angle. But let's talk about you going to Billy Corgan's NWA weekend. It's a big, huge weekend with night number 1, fantastic show available, I think, on Fight and Bleacher Reports. This coming Saturday. Sunday is night number 2. But tell us what you're going to be doing there, and what talent you might be having represent you there. And it sounds like another super fun weekend.
Yeah. First of all, I love what we're doing with the current NWA. I really appreciate Billy Corgan for being nice enough to let me be involved and redeem what I lost after my investment in the NWA for 13, 14, whatever years it was, as an owner, and then to lose it and to be the guy that literally had to sign the trademark to another person. I literally was the final executive director of Pro Wrestling Organization LSC because everybody else had resigned. And so doing this stuff with Billy has been great, and his patience to build a business that isn't what everybody else is trying to do. Everybody else is into in terms of trying to get over into a larger theater. How do we get bigger? Billy's been smart in that he's understood that the visual product we've presented, albeit on YouTube and then on Fight and then Fight and YouTube, is all a building block to something else, but also within a controlled cost and an efficient presentation and a look that is reminiscent of the past and yet very forward momentum. It's certainly not old school in terms of the camera work and the technology, but we're not interested in the larger building being the story, the pyrotechnics being the story, or the ring introduction being more important than the match. The key within the current NWA is to present athletes, to present real conflict, and to allow a suspension of disbelief, and to entertain. So there can be nonsense characters because wrestling, even in its old school form, was always a three-ring circus. I always joke with older guys that like to reminisce on back in the day when it was real. I said, yeah, back when men used to wrestle bears.
Yeah.
It's like it never was what everyone wants to remember it was. It simply was easier to convince the audience it was real. It always was what it was then and what it is now. The difference now is that we sometimes lose control of the story and the art form, which is what happens in the ring on stage, because wrestling is a unique art form. If you translate the art form primarily to pyrotechnics, which would be the current version of flying all over the place or high spots, you can end up having a problem eventually in terms of things working over time, because your pyrotechnics end up taking over. And once you get over on the sizzle, all you can do is to increase that.
Exactly. Oh, let me tell you something about, speaking of losing control, there was a three-ring circus in wrestling. I believe the year was 73. Napolitano and I were there. It was a Johnny Powers, Pedro Martinez thing in, it was either Cleveland or Columbus, Ohio. I think it was Cleveland. And they had three rings in the middle of this baseball field. And there was tournaments going on in each of the three rings at the same time. A women's, a midget, and a tag tournament. That was to have been one of the reasons we were there, was to shoot the first and only time that Wahoo McDaniel would team with Jay Strongbow. Of course, Jay Strongbow was an Italian-American, but Wahoo didn't show, sadly, for that one.
Yeah, I started watching Jay as Joe Scarpa, and then when
in Florida,
I went up to visit my grandmother one time for Christmas, all of a sudden I saw him doing an Indian war dance, and I went, what the how the hell, what happened? How did that But he was doing the same freaking comeback. It was just different because he would do the war dance when he was Strongbow, but he would do the same no sell, the thing that Hogan finally capitalized on when he did his no sell comeback, which was Jay Strongbow's comeback. He was doing the same thing as Scarpa. He just did it differently. But it was the same thing. So I was one of my earliest, that was when I was a kid. It had to be, I don't know, 60s. First time I saw it and I was going, oh, it's like first time you see
right.
The stocking stuffer presents on top of the refrigerator and Santa hasn't delivered them yet. It's like, oh, okay.
You get smartened up at a young age.
Yeah, but literally Scarpa and Strongbow pretty much solidified to me, okay, this is more of a work than I was even aware. All right, now I'm enjoying this even more. Because I was into it from the first time. My first match was Johnny Valentine versus a jobber. And he killed the jobber. And of course, years later, I found out that he did kill the jobber. And what I saw was real because that was Johnny Valentine. So my first match, Gordon Soley calling, Johnny Valentine killing a jobber, first match I ever saw, I went, holy crap. And that hooked me. How can you can't do better. Johnny Valentine as real can be in the moment. And Gordon Soley calling it like it's legit. It was like, best education a person. And I was brought up watching Eddie Graham's stuff. Got the best booker that ever existed in wrestling.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Valentine was promised the book by Mike LaBelle in 73, August of 73. He came in, he did TV for us, and they were promoting 2 weeks upcoming huge death match for the America's title, him against his old adversary in Texas, John Tolis. Valentine goes to complete his New Japan tour for Inoki. He gets a phone call from Mike LaBelle saying he kind of changed his mind, but will he still, on the book, giving him the book, but will he still come in and do the main event? Valentine told me, he told Mike LaBelle to F himself. So Vince made a nervous call to Vince Sr., sends him Monsoon to do one of the worst main events I'd ever seen because Gino just couldn't do much against Tolis. Valentine then accepts the book immediately. He was offered it like days later while he's still in Japan again because he no-showed LA in Charlotte. And the first thing he told all the talent was, we're not going to show any light, no light, lay them in. And, but back to that other story, the reason that the three-ring circus failed, it sadly failed, and the fans, they just couldn't follow it. How can you follow tournaments and then main event matches like Johnny?
Yeah. I was going to say that just sounds silly to me. You
can only focus on one thing and suspend.
I was lecturing somebody at a show recently because they did something outside the ring right when the finish was happening that was distracting, such that the audience would watch what that person was doing before they would watch the finish. And I've always taught talent, when it's time for the finish, you need to make sure you're not distracting. Even if you're outside brawling, you've got to find a way to slow down and draw attention back to the stage, because we are an art form here. We're telling a story based on the beginning, middle, and end of a match. The match's conclusion is the key. It's the curtain call. It's the whole deal. And if you're doing all this stuff over here and we don't see that, then we've just screwed the whole thing, because it doesn't matter what else happened if you don't deliver on your finish. So, that's why high spots don't matter, is they have nothing to do with the finish.
Yeah, exactly.
They're pyrotechnics.
That's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem. I love that term you have for pyrotechnics, because I have a problem with that. There's no psychology there.
Oh, there can be.
Sure.
But you have to do that.
You have to connect the dots. There has to be transitions, one thing leading into another. And sometimes, like some of these guys, if you know what I'm talking about, backstage they go, all I want to do is get my shit in.
Yeah, it's high spots for the sake of getting high spots in, which are just fireworks for the sake of fireworks. Nobody remembers a fireworks display, and particularly the crescendo of it. It's just a bunch of stuff happening, and nobody comes home and goes, do you remember that one firework? And in wrestling, everybody should go home going, do you believe what happened at the end of that match?
That's all they remember is the finish anyway.
And it should be. But unfortunately, sometimes we try to load so much in the front end of what we do that by the time we get to the finish, nobody cares.
But that brings us back to Valentine putting like a headlock on Jack Briscoe and sitting there laying on it for however many minutes, and the audience going crazy because it's building to a crescendo. Something as simple as that that's meaningful.
No one would today have the patience to watch, like I said, I watched Dory and Jack go 60, and it was one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
Yep.
But I don't believe that the current audience would have the patience for that. And now if you do it, it's a stunt, because you're just trying to do it as opposed to doing it because it's what the business needs at the moment. Right now, our stories are best told in 10 to 15 minute chunks, unfortunately. Because that's what our television product has built us toward, and even our live event programming has built us toward. Where the average TV match is 4 to 6 minutes, the average main event match, the arena match is 10 to 15 minutes. So we're really not in the business we were years ago, where you could do a 4 or 5 match card and it would be plenty, because you'd have an hour in your main. I mean, and you knew it was going to be that, and that was what it expected. If you didn't have an hour or 45 minutes or more in your main event, that the crowd would have rebelled back in the day. Now the crowd would be bored if you did that.
Yeah, with a boring chess. 2 things I'll end with. That's what reminded me of Dory Sr.'s territory in Amarillo. He might have a max 6, 7, 8 guys total on one show, and he might pair them up in singles and then bring them together in a tag. Maybe
three singles and a 6-man. Yeah.
that classic stuff. And the fact that Vern Gagne on his TV, it was must watch in the 70s, because it eventually replaced the studio stuff that promoter Ed Francis and Lord Tally-Ho, James Blears would do. They would bring in Vern's TV, so I'd sit and watch that, etc. But Vern had typically one major angle a year, if that, one a year, one every year and a half. Now say Raw or SmackDown, and this is say when it was still Vince, pre-Hunter, pre-Levesque era, you have multiple angles every show. You definitely have to have a lot of coffee to keep up with everything in AEW.
Yeah. Well, no, but and AEW is not a good example because the young man booking it is learning as he's going, and that's not disrespectful. Tony only knows what he knows, and he just happens to be a really rich guy that has the ability to learn on the fly. And I think the unfortunate thing, early on, I never had money to throw at wrestling, so thank God for that. But bless his heart that he does, because a lot of people are getting paid. But you can't learn and be booking yourself because you can't learn from yourself. I was blessed that I worked with Jerry Jarrett, trained by Eddie Graham. I worked with Dutch Mantell, trained by Eddie Graham. I worked with Dusty Rhodes, trained by Eddie Graham. I worked with people that had a basic foundation. And you talk about one angle, and I was not a fan of Vern's booking because Vern was that guy. He didn't like to book a lot of stuff. And I think you need to pay attention to your whole card. And that's what I learned from watching Eddie Graham in the 60s and 70s. His entire card was something that was interesting. There was no throwaway. There was an angle underneath with Dale Lewis wrestling Joe Scarpa. It was Dale Lewis, Joe Scarpa, Battle of the Sleepers underneath. And you still had Eddie or Dusty or Hero or Malenko or
Jr.
all the guys that were the main event guys. But you all the way up and down the card. I would see a show at Dinnicky Auditorium, and in the opening match was Bearcat Wright. I mean, come on. And as a fan,
I saw Dick the Bruiser and Bobo Brazil in the opener in a tag at Kiel once, and it blew my mind.
Yeah, but you're seeing all these people, and just seeing different versions. As I became a fan, that was the fun part for me. Was you'd see the changes people had from one place to another. Like Raul Mata, for example, would work in the Lucha Libre shows. And was one guy, but then he could come to the East Coast and be another guy a little bit.
Wait, he came up from Mexico City, the Luderoth promotion, the oldest one in the world at like 83 years old. He started for us in LA. He was there from early 1970 through about 75. And then he moved to Florida to retire, and he worked for Eddie Graham, where you saw him.
That's where I saw him after, but I had seen him on Lucha Libre the Canal 23, me había falado su Canal Verrido.
Oh, that was our syndicated show. We had 2 shows in LA.
Yeah, and the first time I saw Rumata, he came down to the ring with his cheeks all puffy to wrestle Ernie. And Ernie was doing the tape thumb gimmick, and he grabbed him and he thumb. And of course, Raul Mata came to the ring, and it was obvious he had like a ton of red stuff in his mouth. It was like so obvious, but it was great. He came down and then he gets stabbed. All of a sudden, he starts oozing blood out of his mouth. And
that was 1972 when Spanish International Network (SIN) syndicated our Wednesday night Lucha Libre from the Olympic Auditorium.
Desde Olympic Auditorium, su canal. Yeah, Lucha Libre.
Richmond 9571, the RI 9517
Yeah, no. It helped me learn. It helped me with my Spanish back in the day.
That was
un tremendo golpe, un tremendo golpe.
But the insane thing, and I know we're wrapping up here for Jonathan, the insane thing was our syndicated Hispanic show taped Wednesdays at the Olympic Auditorium, and you guys get it in New York, Boston, and a lot of places in Florida. About a week later, we had an all-English version, the Primo one, where all the angles happened on Saturday, with Dick Lane and Jimmy Lennon Sr.
Oh, I love the Spanish one. I was a huge.
But the insane thing was
Gorman and Goliath as heels. I was a huge Gorman and Goliath heel fan. I loved them. They were awesome.
I shot him a million times. Drove and was at Pablo. That's Great Goliath's funeral.
And Blassie was in there at the time. Yes, he may have been booking
and Maniac Tolis and Victor Rivera. But the insane thing was the guys doing the English interviewing of the locker room, and the locker room was actually just the door that led to the wrestlers' part of the parking lot. It wasn't a locker room. The locker room was downstairs. They never filmed it there. So they would have Gene LaBelle, often, who just died, and I'm going to speak at his memorial in October. he would interview the lucha guys like Gorman and Goliath, Mata, Carlos Mata, Mascaras, and then they'd have the Hispanic guy, the lead commentator, Miguel Alonso, interviewing the English guys. Miguel could barely speak English. Gene could speak no Spanish. It made no sense, but it was still fun. It was insane.
Yeah. I never got to work with the LaBelles, but tremendous respect for their impact on our business. It's just tremendous job.
Gene was the godfather of grappling. I mean, the fans, all they would see was the short, schlubby guy interviewing the wrestlers.
Yeah, but the whole, as you know well, the whole history of Los Angeles wrestling is tied around once the LaBelles got involved, and so many different people flowed in and out of that thing, but they remained a constant and managed to survive all the way through that. And just
Eileen Eaton, who was the mother of Gene and Mike, Eileen Eaton promoted the boxing, but she was married to Cal Eaton. Now, Cal Eaton, and when he died, Cal's stepson, meaning her son, Mike LaBelle, in charge of the wrestling, because Eileen wanted no part of that. And then she, with Mike, promoted the boxing, and they allotted 10% of Cal's estate to go to Gene. And they finally said, well, you got to do something to earn your 10%. So he didn't want to have any part of the pro wrestling. He was a straight judo martial arts guy, working with Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris, etc. But he learned to, he was fairly okay with that. But he didn't like it at first, and he got to be really close friends with Tolis and Blassie and Raul Mata and Cowboy Frankie Lane and Killer Kowalski and stuff. But I better I want to throw to Jonathan, but let's have you, Bill, plug anything and everything you'd like. Of course, the NWA is this weekend. You can order.
Yeah, that's the big key. Pay-per-view on Saturday and Sunday. We've got 3 days of TV tapings after that will fuel NWA Power, NWA USA, and all the various other things we do. Don't know when it's going to be announced for sure, but there's some cool stuff coming from NWA, including some potential series television. And there is ongoing interest in the NWA transitioning from its right now digital theaters to broadcast, cable, and other outlets. But Billy is being smart and creating an efficiently produced product that I think will end up being very attractive to broadcast, because the other product that's already on is already at we're going to blow everything up and we're going to try to be as big as possible, the high-end expense side. And there's room for something that's different. And I think the NWA has captured that by taking a step backward and look that I find very positive. I'm a big fan of studio wrestling. One of my greatest moments in wrestling was I hosted the final USWA live 90-minute show as the lead announcer. And I interviewed Lance Russell, recovering from heart surgery at the time, in the hospital live. And that, at that point, I could have given up my entire career. Literally, it was just because that format. And if you think about it, that was only 2 cameras and one that could barely move. I mean, the cameras were gigantic, so there wasn't a lot of movement on the cameras. Now we're still in that environment, but the camera movement is better, and NWA is capitalizing on a look that was popularized in USWA, which is to get the camera as close as possible to the talent, and to not USWA, excuse me, World Class, to get the camera close to the talent, to bring the audience into the ring. And so when you talk about Johnny Valentine saying everything needs to be tight or no air, that is very much our requirement at NWA. We don't want anybody to get hurt, but at the same time, we are trying to reflect the product as it should be reflected, which is as a serious athletic contest.
Let me just say this.
I think we're doing it well, and the athletes that are doing it are doing a great job, and I'm blessed that a number of them are my clients. So that's cool.
Billy Corgan came to a bunch of CACs. I knew him when he first got involved in wrestling with a smaller Chicago indie. It wasn't Sammy DeCiro's.
Windy City or something?
Yeah, before TNA, but I like the fact, and I do want to give props to Tony Khan because I like the fact that these guys, Tony and Billy especially, have a lot of heart. They grew up as wrestling marks, wrestling fans. Tony Khan grew up going. His dad took him to ECW, a ton of ECW shows.
Yeah, actually, they both were big ECW fans, so that's weird. I mean, it's because both of them ended up having their first sort of experiences at an ECW level. Tony as a fan, Billy as being backstage at the time and participating.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But these guys have a heart. This was when we weren't seeing that from Vince Jr. And they are erudite, intelligent guys. They have a lot of money, so they can do things right. I absolutely love what I've seen since Billy has done the NWA. I love studio wrestling as you do. There's a magic to it. It doesn't always have to be these gigantic mammoth arenas.
I love a podium and a promo. I love a podium and a good promo. If you can tell me in 30 seconds why you matter, that's one of the great parts of this business.
That's the beauty of Lance Russell, Dave Brown, Corey Macklin in Memphis.
And to be
Bill
able to
Mercer in Dallas.
then on the opposite side, the Jerry Lawlers, the Billy Dundees, the Dream Machines,
of course.
the Dream Machines, all the guys that could talk.
Austin Idol, you're talking Austin Idol, obviously,
and we get to have Austin, which is freaking awesome. But the guys that they had to talk you into the building, and that still matters, because that's all part of the whole soap opera that we build. I mean, you can't. You can try to present a match, and you always can. You can establish the heel and the baby face. You can create a reason why the crowd cares, and you can deliver a finish. You can always do that in any match. That's matchmaking. But to tell a story, you really do need to give it some meat, and that's where the promo is key. And if you can't talk in wrestling, it's always what's going to hold you back at some level, unless you simply have a gimmick that can get past it. We talked about Abdullah. He had a gimmick that could get past it. Somebody else could talk. He never had to. Sabu never had to. There's certain people where you can get away with just being mysterious, but that's the exception, not the rule. Otherwise, you better be able to talk people into being interested in you and in what you're doing, and that's a lot of what the NWA does really, really well.
It's fantastic. I believe Trevor Murdoch is defending the NWA title against Tyrus, who's got a brand new book out.
Which will be interesting. Tyrus is amazing. I mean, that's an interesting match because that's for some people that's going to be a nightmare. For others, it's going to be a dream because Tyrus is a big monster. He moves slow, and everything he does looks real. And Murdoch, trained by Harley, is the real deal. I mean, he can go. I've worked with him since the early part of TNA when he was a dub. And he's as good now as he was then. And he's almost coming into his own. And as a champion, he's been brilliant. And Nick Aldis is on the card and having a good match with Flip Gordon, former champion. And without Nick Aldis...
Flip Gordon is one of the most impressive guys. If you love high spots, Flip is one of the most amazing guys. Big Japan career.
Yeah. And Aldis was the guy. I mean, without Aldis
he's the heart
Billy,
and soul.
Billy backing him, Billy and Aldis together rebuilt the NWA.
Aldis is the heart and soul of the current NWA, no question.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And backs it up. Backs it up in the way he
Jonathan,
talks.
we better let you close this out here.
Well, I just wanted to ask a final question because of what you've been talking about a little bit. And that being the attention span of fans, whether it be 10 to 15 minute matches and everything you guys were just discussing. I'd be curious to know if the mentality of the fan base could be changed to, I'm not saying a 20-minute headlock like Johnny Valentine would do, but, meet somewhere in the middle to change the mentality.
If you build the story and you get the people to want it, yes. But you just can't deliver it without setup. But yeah, you can deliver anything still. You can still deliver a longer story, but you have to have the right two people. You have to have convinced the audience to get invested. You can book people to anything. Right now, for example, Taz's kid that's going by the name Hook is being built as a monster. And he's winning matches in 1 to 3 minutes. The problem with that is, can he do a 10-minute match? Or will it betray what he hasn't learned yet because he hasn't had a chance to really wrestle? So you can book people into any spot, but you have to be careful how much you can give the audience before you betray yourself. So it's the same thing of, could we book 2 people to a match where people would be willing to watch them wrestle for 45 minutes? Yes. Could you do it with any 2 people? No. Because that would be boring. I wouldn't care. And unlike old time wrestling, where we were more patient to allow our interest to grow through the match itself, nowadays you've got to be interested in that match going in totally, or you're not going to invest yourself at all. You're not going to start watching a long match and stick with it if you're not already invested. You just won't. Which is, back in the day, people might, because it was a different business. And also it helped that there were fewer choices. It's like back when wrestling was at its, when it was getting its biggest audiences, in theory, of a percentage of audience, not the largest number of people. We have to all remember that there was 3 stations in most cities, 3 to 5 stations. There was no cable. When I got started, cable was in less than 50% of the country. When I was putting stuff on TV, that's why TV mattered. Now TV doesn't matter really, unless you're on a big league TV, and that puts you into the big money area.
Mm-hmm.
Small TV doesn't matter for anybody. Somebody that says they're on some local TV station, bless your heart, thank God you are, and I hope you're not spending too much money.
Yeah, and that's why it's good that Billy is doing the way he's doing it with the digital platforms and fight and
build
things
interest
like that.
build interest in the product, build it as an asset that somebody wants to invest money in and bring farther along, and then take a logical next step. You don't go from what we're doing and all of a sudden start doing arena, right? That would be stupid, because we're not built for arena. We're built for smaller theater, closer product, more intimate, character development, storytelling, different. And that's where the NWA today reflects the NWA of the past, and at the same time provides itself with a niche in the business.
Same prospect, that's for sure. But definitely going to have you back. Is there any place people can find you, Bill, if they wish to see what's going on in your world?
I'm all over this social media. I'm on the Twitter. I'm on the Facebook. I don't get the Instagram, but I'm on the Instagram. The Instagram makes no sense to me because it's instant. Everything I want, I look at the internet still as a website. So Facebook I like because the stuff stays there. And it's sort of a collection of stuff that, you're putting your own little website together. And Twitter's fine. It's just a bunch of meaningless statements and pictures. But yeah, I'm on the Twitter as William Behrens, either Bill Behrens. My hardest part, if you can put my name into a search engine, you'll find me. It's Behrens, the worst spelling ever.
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
If you can spell my name, you can find me everywhere. I'm all over the Google. It's a good thing.
Well, Bill, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bill. Thank you. Fun time.
So great finally connecting with my brother, Bill. And I told you he was going to be one of the greatest guests on the planet. He was.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
We're going to have to do another marathon with him. That's for sure.
Another story frenzy. I can tell you the story of New Jack breaking a rule I never knew would be broken, and we can leave with this if you want. And do you know what that rule was?
Nope.
What would that be?
He was living at my house, and I told him he could stay here unless he broke one rule, and the rule was no crack. So there we go.
Well,
he holds the record as the only person to break the no crack rule.
On that note,
Domarigato gozaimashite, Bill. Kumbate kudasai.
Mazel tov. Oh, and to end this thing as we started, rest in peace, Howard.
Yes.
Boom, boom.
And we're not talking Colt Cabana.
Colt Cabana.
Oh, no. He's still feuding with CM Punk.
Yeah.
Boy, does Bill know his stuff. He knows everything that's going on right now.
Are you annoyingly even keel? E-methamine could be right for you.
I have a disease, all right? I need help.
E-methamine lets you get gagged up on whooped chicken parts without yellowing one's teeth. Yeah! Contact your doctor today if you experience the following.
Oh my God.
Increases in blood flow, boost in testosterone, ending of erectile dysfunction.
You're naughty.
This medicine is made for extreme cases of being even keel or having extreme depression.
Oh, come on.
Side effects include fits of rage, acne, bleeding in folks around you, whooping cough, hallucinations, comas, trouble swallowing, decrease in semen, increasing amounts of selling yourself, amnesia, night terrors, higher mortgage rates, and increased sensations in not having suicidal urges.
Oh